I have a question regarding this meditation. So, when we do self-enquiry, is there a point where we reach and we don't have to read any more scripture or any text, and at some point there is only practical way to perform it? Because we constantly go to some books or some resource to find our answers, even though we know like the path to it. Is there a necessity, like we stop it at some time during our inquiry? Yeah, that's my question.
Thank you. Neha, have we spoken before? Is this the first time we've spoken? I don't know.
Yes.
This is the first time. Okay. Well, welcome to you. And I always like to ask when I meet somebody where they're calling from. Whereabouts are you based, Neha?
Yeah, I'm originally from India. I moved to the States almost like 7 years back. Yeah, I stay here with my family, with my little one at home. Yeah, almost it's evening here and nothing, but it's all the spiritual practice has been like going on for a few years, but it's gone. Yeah.
Wonderful. And whereabouts are you in the States as well? Do you mind me asking?
Sorry?
Whereabouts are you in the States, in the US?
Okay, I stay in Texas, Austin. Yeah.
Wonderful. It's great to have you here with us.
Thank you.
So, and Dago, I can see you've raised your hand. I'm just going to lower it if that's okay. Thank you, Dago. And we'll try and come to you afterwards. So, Neha, your question is, I think your question is, I think your question is, do we have to eventually come to a point? So I think you phrased it in two different ways, I think. But I think your question is, do we eventually have to come to a point where we're no longer looking at these books for answers? And we're just doing the practice. Is that your question, Neha? Because, or was your question, how do we do that? Or how do we come to a point where we're no longer looking at books?
I think mine was the first one.
First one, okay.
Yes.
Do we have to come to a point in our practice where we're no longer referring to books and outside sources of information? For this type of thing, there is no rule. There's no rule. It might seem better from an intellectual point of view. Sorry, I'm just going to move you on my screen so I can see you now. It might seem better from an intellectual point of view if we could get to this point where we have so much faith and understanding of the teaching that we no longer have to look into books or outside sources, videos, teachers, and we're just doing the teaching. And surely this is preferable, we might think, right? Than having to constantly have doubts and questions come up and then have to look in this book or that scripture or this video or whatever. Yeah. In some ways that's true. And honestly, when you have deep faith in the teaching, the need for all these other books starts to fall away. First, you might find that you are looking in all these different books from all these different teachings. You're looking at Eastern teachings, Western teachings, old teachings, new teachings, you know. And then you might find, oh, I like this style of teaching better. I like the Advaita ones. I like the Buddhist ones. I like the Christian ones, whatever it is, you see. And you start reading all those ones maybe. And then but here, maybe you start realizing, oh, I just need Bhagavan's teachings. But even there's a whole range of material you can read. So there is truth that as we mature on the spiritual path, we don't need such a vast array of different teachings. We become happy with less and less and less and less and less. And Bhagavan Ramana himself said that the people with complex minds, they need these really large scriptures with all the commentaries, yeah? But he said people who are ripe and ready, they'll be satisfied with the short works like Ulladu Narpadu, 40 verses on reality. Upadesha Saram, just 30 verses long. Who am I? Just a few pages long. You see, when you're ripe, you don't need all these scriptures. You're happy with just the essence. That's all you need. And in Who Am I, even this question, a similar question is asked in Who Am I? Let me find it. Oh yes, question 23 in this version in the collected works of Who Am I? Question 23: is it any use reading books for those who long for release? Release here means liberation. Is it any use reading books for those who long for release or liberation? And Bhagavan's answer is, all the texts say that in order to gain release, one should render the mind quiescent. Therefore, their conclusive teaching is that the mind should be rendered quiescent. Once this has been understood, there is no need for endless reading. And then he carries on. In order to quieten the mind, one has only to inquire within oneself what oneself is. That's the only thing you have to do. What do you have to do? One has only to inquire within oneself what oneself is. How could this search be done in books? One should know oneself with one's own eye of wisdom. Eye of wisdom here is a metaphor for the self. So one should know oneself with one's own self, with one's own eye of wisdom, meaning not through the body-mind, but inwardly. The self is within the 5 sheaths. That means the body-mind. It's not a part of the body-mind, it's within. It's closer to us than the body-mind. The self is within the 5 sheaths, but books are outside them, meaning the 5 sheaths refer to the body-mind. We need to use the body-mind to read books, which are outside the body-mind. The self is closer to us than even the body-mind. So how could books help us, which are even outside the body-mind? Since the self has to be inquired into by discarding the 5 sheaths, this means we have to remove the body-mind inwardly through self-inquiry. Since the self has to be inquired into by discarding the 5 sheaths, it is futile to search for it in books. And then he says a wonderful line: there will come a time when one will have to forget all that one has learned, because all that learning is book learning, right? So this would seem to support the idea that the sooner we can get rid of the books and the sooner we can understand the teaching and the sooner we can inquire into the self, then the better. And this, in a way, is true. But I'm going to give you a caveat in a moment. So we should realize that what we are is distinct from the body, mind, and world. And we should realize that is what I am. We should turn to that. And if we start asking questions and listening, looking for answers endlessly, this doesn't help us. Because the only answer is to discover the self. And the only way of discovering the self is by turning away from objective phenomena towards the I am, towards the self. Yeah. But here's the caveat. Caveat is that the way this unfolds for every body mind is different. So if you find you're pulled towards reading these books, this means that your knowledge and understanding intellectually of the teaching is not enough for you to turn within. Your knowledge of the teaching is imperfect. This is why you're still seeking answers through the intellect. The more you get the correct teachings for your intellect, the more your intellect will naturally settle down and stop looking into books and to external authorities for the answers. So what I'm saying is that for some people, the book reading and the seeking externally will go on and on and on and on and on. And there'll be a constant refinement of the intellectual knowledge and understanding of the teaching. And this actually can be very helpful for self-inquiry. Because sometimes for some people, they will just need to do self-inquiry perfectly once. And until then, they're just getting a better and better intellectual understanding of the teaching. And that intellectual understanding of the teaching will eventually drive their mind inwards towards the self. So it's not clear cut for everyone. Some people, they'll be doing the self-inquiry. They'll throw away all the books and they'll just do the practice of self-inquiry. And that for some people, that'd be fantastic. But for others, that the quicker path might be to read books and to engage with the teachers and the teachings. Manana. This is the importance of manana. Manana means contemplating the teachings. Sravana is listening to the teachings. Manana is contemplating the teachings. Sravana Manana is very important. It ripens you for self-inquiry. Everyone's path is slightly different. So let's not dismiss the role of manana. Looking for answers in the teachings. You see? If you have a desire to look in books and read books, there's probably something in these books for you. This is why you'll keep on going back to them, because there's a lack of understanding in the mind. And this is driving you to look for answers. So we shouldn't throw away the books if we're still longing for them, because there may well be something there in them for us. It means we haven't got a good enough understanding of the teaching intellectually. Once our understanding of the teaching matures intellectually, on the intellectual level, it starts driving us inwards towards the self. And we'll find that we don't want all these books. These books that once we thought were helpful will start to get in the way.
So it's more like an intuition from inside, like when you feel fulfilled about the knowledge.
But it's also, do you have questions about the teaching that are outstanding? You see?
Okay.
Because if you have questions about the teaching that are outstanding, then you will naturally feel like you want to ask them and you'll naturally want answers to them. And it's all very well somebody saying to you, turn away from the thoughts. But if you're compelled to follow those thoughts and ask those questions, you need those questions to be resolved. And only once those questions are resolved will you then start to turn inwards? Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
If you're driven towards books, likelihood is you have unanswered questions. That's why you're looking in books. You're not satisfied with the practice, or you don't understand what the practice is, or you don't understand this, or you don't understand that, and that's why you're not doing the practice. Or that's why you're not just doing the practice. Whereas when you are completely convinced that the practice is the only way for self-realization and everything else is distraction, then you'll be compelled to do the practice. Do you see? So perfect intellectual understanding of the teaching will force you into the practice. You see, imagine you come to a fork in the road and there are two paths. You can either take the left path or the right path. Yeah. And someone says, look, the right path will go to liberation, the left path will go to hell. Yeah. But you're not sure. You're not sure about it. So what do? You have to read books, you've got to look in maps, you've got to ask all these different people. When you're 100% certain that the right path goes to heaven and the left path goes to hell, then you'll be compelled. You'll be running down the right path as fast as you can. But until then, when you're uncertain, you won't do that because you don't know, you're not sure. Just because someone says the right path, the right-hand side is path to heaven, and the left-hand side is the path to hell. You won't, because you're not convinced, you'll be hesitant of what to do. You'll still be looking for more information. So this is Sravana Manana. We're collecting data, with understanding more and more. And as we get more experience and understanding of what is the right path and what is the wrong path, eventually we develop a conviction. And this compels, once we're convinced, then we're compelled to go down the path that we're convinced is the right way to go. This is often the way it works. So this is the importance of Sravana Manana.
Thank you, Tom.
What do you think of that answer, Neha?
Yeah, that was good, because for me, I have been listening about Mananam Shravanam, like through stages. But there comes a point where, like I can understand it intellectually and I'm convinced about certain things in my mind. But so Mananam Shravanam is so stressed, like it feels like, do we have to keep on continuing it, like reading different books?
Oh no,
different things.
No,
so,
only if you want to. If you don't, if you don't, that was the question. That's why I remember there was another part of your question. That was it, wasn't it? No, you don't need to do these things if you don't want to. No, not at all. No, you don't. Sravana Manana is not necessary if you already understand the practice. They're just there to teach you what the practice is. That's it. And that was the answer that Bhagavan gave in Who Am I, wasn't it? Did you see?
Yeah.
So again, have you read that before?
Not yet. I am on his the 40 verses. I'm still reading that one.
That's some more reading you have to ironically do there.
Yeah, I haven't. So Bhagwan's teachings are mostly, I started with the 40 verses with a different study group here. And I think his teachings were very direct and very meaningful. And that's when I find like every verse and those 40 verses is very meaningful. I haven't read any of the other teachings, so like I have started, it's recent, but it's at very slow pace. I think it's, I don't know how to pronounce, Ulapadu Undinayar.
Yeah. That is basically Uladu Narpadu. but I think that is the Tamil version was called that, and then when it was translated into Sanskrit, or maybe I've got that the wrong way around.
Yeah, it's in exactly. Yeah.
Maybe that's the Sanskrit version.
Yes.
I think, yeah. So I recommend people read The Path of Sri Ramana as an introduction
Yeah.
to Bhagwan's teachings, because if you're starting with Ulladu Narpadu, there are a few things that can go wrong.
Yeah, I am. Yes, that's correct. Because I read that book after while I'm studying these 40 verses, and that's where I found, like, when I was doing the 40 verses, I had some wrong notions or some misinterpretations about those words, and that was again according to my intellect or my ego or whichever, or my intellectual capacity. And the Path of Sri Ramana, yeah, it's a beautiful book. And that's where I found, like, myself clearing most of my doubts. But then again, I came to this point where, like, how much, at what point we get convinced about, that inquiry, or how long does the Mananam Shravanam take place?
Yeah, you don't see. So question 23 in Who Am I? Question 23. Yeah, you don't need to read these texts once you understand what the point of the texts are. You just need to do the practice. The point of the texts is to tell you to do the practice and how to do the practice and why to do the practice, and to convince you meaning not persuade you, but give you that conviction that this is the only way, to help give you, to support you. And then once you understand that, then you don't need anything else. You just need to do the practice. So even satsang, even this meeting is not necessary if you have a very strong conviction of what to do, how to do it. All the other things like reading and coming to these meetings and things are only there if you can't do the practice. So Sravana Manana is only needed to help you do Nididhyasana. The problem with just doing Nididhyasana is that many people think that Nididhyasana means the practice. Basically, it means self-inquiry. It means meditation on the self to discover the self. Yeah. The true Nididhyasana is not an action of the body or mind. It's not action in the world. Many people think they're doing Nididhyasana, but they're not doing it correctly. And this is the value of Sravana Manana, is that through hearing the teachings and contemplating the teachings and asking questions about the teachings, we discover what the true practice actually is. And then through doing the practice, through Nididhyasana, we discover even more what the true practice is and isn't. Because a part of it we can discover through Sravana Manana. We can discover what self-inquiry is through hearing the teaching, through contemplating the teaching, through questioning the teaching, through hearing answers to our questions. But then a lot of self-inquiry, we can only really discover how to do it through doing it or through attempting to do it. And most of the books start to fall short here. Yeah, maybe a good teacher, well, a good teacher will be able to help you through that. Now, if you're reading Ulladu Narpadu in a study group, my only caution would be, is this study group, is that correct? You said a study group.
Yeah.
See, many people misinterpret the meaning of the verses in Ulladu Narpadu. So you just have to be careful on the study group. And have you come across the Lakshmana Sarma translation of Ulladu Narpadu?
Yes, I think, yeah, I have that. I found it on your website, I think. Yes.
Perfect. Perfect. If you have that, then you're much less likely to go astray, because he translates the verses according to the inner meaning of the teachings, and he gives commentary where necessary. And I've given a few comments as well.
Yes.
So if you're not sure on the meaning, and you have that resource there. The other thing about Uludu Narpadu is that it's in some ways it's highly philosophical. There are only something like 3 verses out of the 40 verses that really focus in on what the practice of self-inquiry actually is.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, all the verses are extremely valuable. But when we get more and more convinced about the teaching, even texts like Uludu Narpadu become less useful to us. All these texts eventually become less useful to us. And the only part, and if we do want a text, the only part that becomes useful is the part that shows us what to do. Because we're already convinced of that we need to do that. What do I do? Tell me what to do, how to do it. Not all the philosophy around it. Thank you very much, Neha.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom.
And great to have you with us.
Yeah, I'm glad to be a part of this group. I enjoyed I have joined few sessions.
Yeah.
I like the videos. That's where I stumbled upon the Satsang group. But
wonderful.
It's more direct. It's more, the teachings from you are, maybe I would say at now my body mind level, it's more intellectually connecting, but it's really good. Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you here. So thank you for being here. Much appreciated. Thank you for your wonderful question as well.